Today on Doomed! After a week that will go down, I think, in the history books as the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. Really, that is what the week we just left behind. Sean McElwee joins the show, co-founder of Data for Progress, and obviously, honestly, I should say, in my opinion, the guy who started the Abolish ICE movement, even though the New York Times thinks differently, and we'll be talking about that on the show. And we'll also be talking about the Supreme Court and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's big win in New York 14. All that and more coming up on the show. But first, I have to welcome our guest, Sean McElwee. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure. I am now pulling us up on the feed so everyone can see us. The little doomed graphic is off. And there we are. Hello, everybody.
Hey.
So, Sean, thank you for joining me today. There was a lot going on, and I know you were moving around the country
Yes.
the past few days. So, yeah, I really appreciate you making the time for us on Doomed. And so let's talk about this week, shall we? This week, huh?
I'm happy too.
Yeah, this week, right? I mean, what are we gonna do about this week? I feel like, I truly feel like if there was a way to just describe how, I guess, I don't know, I'm not bipolar, but I guess if I was to guess how bipolar people felt, if they were, not taking their medication, maybe this is how they would feel this week. It would be the perfect analogy.
I think this is the week that is sort of like socialism or barbarism. Like, it is more clear than ever that those are the two routes and the only two routes that we have.
Right. And people, what are you going to choose? Socialism or barbarism? I got to say, barbarism sounds a lot cooler. For some reason, it does sound like just like I'm in with that one. But
I think Alexandria is making socialism cool as fuck. Like,
no. So
socialism is so cool now.
I'm literally just talking about the word. Like, like if you were to say, like, if we were in some sort of movie and someone was like, that gang over there, they're the socialists, and that gang over there are the barbarians. You would want to be part of the gang called the Barbarians.
Let's start a consulting firm. Like, you know what? We need some like socialist consultants out there. Let's start making some money on the side.
Right.
With some branding consultancy for socialism.
I gotta say, after some of the events, I gotta say, ever since fucking 2016, let me tell you, people like you and me should be running the political consulting firms.
I agree.
And we should be telling Democrats how to win and how to beat Trump. And that's all there is to it. That's not even a joke at this point. I mean,
honestly, a couple more AOCs, and I genuinely believe they will start asking us. I am serious as a heart attack. I don't know.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Let me people who listen to the show know that I've been doing work with Cynthia Nixon's campaign, so I got to tell you that doing that stuff, I can tell you that's not going to be the case, because the Andrew Cuomo people are, really this we could talk about this later because we'll make time for this because I really want to get to this week and the big things that happened this week, and we should. First, you know what? Let's end on a happy note. So let's talk about the fucking worst possible thing, and that's Justice Kennedy retiring from the Supreme Court. I mean, this fucking guy. I'm cursing up a storm. We always curse on this show, but I don't think I've ever dropped so many F-bombs just like in this. What is this? It's like the game today between Denmark and Croatia where they each scored a goal within the first 4 minutes. Yeah. We're going to have a all-time F-bomb drop on this show in the smallest amount of time because this guy, Justice Kennedy, he without a doubt, people have to understand, like when he chooses to retire now, what he's basically saying is, I want Donald Trump to be the guy who picks my replacement. I mean, that's what he's saying. It's not just like, I'm retiring, like I've done my duty, I'm old, I'm whatever. No, he's pretty much saying, I want to retire now before anything happens, and Donald Trump, a guy like Donald Trump at the very least, can't pick my replacement.
It's really reminiscent of Sandra Day O'Connor, where everyone was sort of like, no, Sandra Day O'Connor represents this sort of like older style of conservatism. And at the end of the day, she let Bush pick her appointment. And then even worse, she had the temerity to just like the entire rest of her life just be like whining about the fact that the Supreme Court in the country moving further right. And I am almost 100% certain that within a year, Anthony Kennedy will be giving speeches about how awful Donald Trump is. Every pundit will be like, boy, oh boy. And at the end of the day, all these conservatives, all these Republicans, from Jeff Flake to Anthony Kennedy, love Donald Trump. They love his agenda, and they're going to support it at the end. Like, it's just jarring to me how long it's going to take the media to get that they like him and that they want his policies to exist.
Oh, they're not going to ever get it, because if anything shows that I don't get it, they're still asking out there like the most stupidest of questions in terms of like, Donald Trump said something hypocritical about that immigration bill. First, he said he urges the Republicans in the House to pass it. And then 2 days later, he said, I never urged them to pass it.
Right.
Will that have any reverberations to Donald Trump's president? No, and why are you asking? No one cares about this stuff anymore. You could be a hypocrite all you want now. It doesn't matter. Not even just now. You were able to be a hypocrite for a long time. I mean, yeah, I still do the screenshot thing when I see something hypocritical coming from right-wingers, just because it's funny. I know no one cares. I like to laugh at it, and other people like to laugh at it. When I do that, I'm under no sort of belief that this is going to mean something, or someone's going to feel shy or stupid, or the Republican I'm screenshotting is going to say to themselves, oopsie, what did I do? No, I just think personally, these fucking guys. Like, that's what I'm saying when I'm screenshotting that shit.
I've already seen someone say that Jeff Flake was going to hold up the Supreme Court appointee, which, I mean, in what fucking world? And I've also seen Susan Collins. And it's just like every time they like hold up these people as sort of moderates, and there's no question in my mind that Jeff Flake will extract zero concessions from McConnell. He'll probably do a tweet like, I've just been assured by McConnell that my vote for X right-wing justice will assure that DACA gets brought to the floor, and he'll get steamrolled again. They're utterly useless. And to be entirely honest, I don't even know if every Democrat will vote against Trump's next Supreme Court nominee.
Right. I mean, you have what's her face from Montana? What's her name? I'm having a mental block right now. Trump called her out.
Oh, you're thinking Heidi Heitkamp from Dakota?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Sorry, my bad. Yeah. Heidi Heitkamp. She voted for Gorsuch, and you think that would we don't think this, but her.
Right.
Her people, her centrist blue dogs and all those different various center-right groups, they think, that'll maybe get us some leeway with the Trump guys and the MAGA people. Trump straight up said that on Twitter the other day how you can't count on people like her to support whoever he picks. Are you kidding me? Like, why do these people continue to try to reach out? It doesn't matter. Either, listen, if Heidi Heitkamp wins, it's going to be because more Democrats in North Dakota come out to vote for her. If she loses, it's going to be because more Republicans come out. There is no group of people who is like, oh, she won them over. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I actually just wrote a piece on The Nation on, my think tank sort of studies the way that candidates message around the Supreme Court. And what we actually found was that Democrats tend to message around the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court has positive decisions for the Democratic Party, even though most Supreme Court decisions fuck over the party. So there was a lot of messaging around Obergefell, but there was very little messaging around issues like epic systems. And what that means is that the average Democratic voter is really misunderstanding the ideology of the court. And what really needs to happen, if we're going to have any progress on this, is we need a small d democratic movement, a grassroots movement that actually puts pressure on the court and fundamentally understands it as a political institution. We have to stop pretending that this is law. It's not law. This is politics, day 1 to day 2 to day 3, and the decisions are decided fundamentally by the political realities at play. I'm saying pack the courts. That's what I'm saying. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Sure. So there's actually no constitutional requirement of how many justices sit on the court. And throughout the court's history, it's actually varied. There have been times when there was not 9 justices on the court, and not just because of deaths. And the most sort of significant example of this was during the FDR era. There was what was called the Lochner era. And what essentially was happening at the time was that a conservative majority on the court invented new constitutional doctrines that they used to strike down things like minimum wages, like bans on child labor, workplace safety standards. And FDR essentially said, look, I am the democratically elected leader. I am going to add more justices to the Supreme Court. He had some, made up reason for why this was valuable, but everyone sort of knew it was because he wanted the New Deal to happen. And that actually political pressure was so intense that it actually broke the court. And essentially, there were some timely deaths, and then some more moderate justices eventually just switched over and said, all right, like we see, the writing on the wall. The other example of sort of democratic movements, small d democratic movements, basically overriding the court's will is a bit less progressive, and that is massive resistance to Brown v. Board of Education. I think that people have a sort of storybook telling of Brown v. Board of Education in which the court, says segregation is bad and schools desegregate. The actual story is far different. Brown v. Board of Education desegregated basically 0 schools. And the reason was because Southern political leaders essentially said, I don't give a shit what the court says. In order to create the 9-0 majority that was needed, that was felt to be needed to sort of say we have a 9-0 majority, the words with all deliberate speed were added into a second desegregation decision. And that was interpreted by the lower courts to mean never. And so we have 2 examples in history, one progressive and one regressive, of the ways that essentially politics with a very aggressive organizing and mobilization has overridden the will of the court. And to be entirely honest, I think that there is going to be a need for a similar situation. We're reaching a point where a majority of the Supreme Court justices were appointed by presidents who did not win the popular vote. We have sort of in the circuit and district courts, Trump appointees that are only there because Republicans ignored the blue slip tradition, and Obama and Patrick Leahy respected the blue slip tradition. And as long as we have this sort of situation in which the courts are far to the right of the rest of the nation, we're really starting to question how closely we actually are a democracy.
Right. Quick question, Sean. Were you able to hear me when I asked you that about your article and everything? Because people on the stream are telling me that it cut out. All right, cool. So it should be fixed now.
I heard, you mentioned the article that I wrote for The Nation.
All right, cool. So it should all be good. I don't know what these guys are talking about, but I fixed whatever issue there was something, I think. I fixed it now. Everyone on the stream should hear me. All right, so that to me, so what are the odds, you think, and I'm asking this quite rhetorically, of the Democratic Party packing the courts?
They're incredibly low. From my perspective, the main movement that the court packing is to understand Roberts and Alito and Gorsuch fundamentally as political actors acting within the political system. And as long as the Democratic Party and the Democratic base treat the court as a sort of apolitical actor that can't be moved, they're going to lose. But once they begin understanding Roberts as fundamentally a political actor who cares a lot about the legitimacy of his institution, we can have power. And we really have to create movements, just the way the pro-life folks have done, that understand the court as a key political actor on issues that we care about and mobilize around those issues. And what I actually argue in the piece and what I think people are starting to see more and more is that means we have to talk about economics.
Right.
We have for too long treated the court as fundamentally an institution that rules on things like abortion and things that like gay marriage. And those are two very important things. But the court also has an incredible amount of power to destroy the lives of working people day in and day out and enable economic concentration.
Sean, why are you focusing on white working class Trump voters when you say that? Why are you?
The funny thing is that Mazie Hirono is one of the people who's made this argument most powerfully. And after Epic Systems, after Janus, the reality is that the court is destroying the lives of working people. And I ask Democratic strategists this all the time. I say, what is the one thing that you remember about Gorsuch? What is the thing that sticks to you in the hearing? And everyone says the frozen trucker, right? Gorsuch voted to fuck over a working person who was frozen in the truck. And I'm like, exactly. So why don't you talk about that when Trump's judges come up? Like, why aren't you talking about healthcare? Why aren't you talking about the minimum wage? Why aren't you talking about sexual harassment in the workplace? Why aren't you talking about the way that every day when people go to work, the Supreme Court is making their lives more miserable? And no one really has a good answer for this. And I think that more and more, though, we are seeing the need for this. I mean, particularly because unions are furious about Janus. And the Democratic Party should be terrified by Janus, because if you gut unions fully, the impacts on the ability of the Democratic Party to win elections in states like Michigan and Pennsylvania, which they need for an electoral college victory, decreases dramatically.
You have any examples of any elections where we could have, won those two states and we would have, things would have been better?
It's worth noting that two of those states went right to work right before the 2016 election. I think that there is a very strong chance that is what changes the outcome.
So, you know what? Let's get a little more into Janus then, because that is what kicked off this week from hell that had little moments of really highs that were great and wonderful that we'll get to at the end, like I said.
Yeah.
But, Janus was the thing where, we woke up on Monday morning, off to work, and check your Twitter feed or your RSS feeds or whatever you crazy people listening to this stream and podcast use to keep up with the news. And the Janus decision came in, and boy, did it suck.
Yeah, Janus is probably the most significant decision the Supreme Court has made since Shelby, because what it does really definitively is changes the playing field that politics occurs on. Much like Shelby sort of opened up a wave of voter suppression, Janus is voter suppression part 2. It's voter suppression in the form of making it harder for unions to engage with working class folks who are going to vote. And that includes a lot of working class, particularly people of color in states like Michigan. So in most states, there are collective bargaining agreements that public sector unions have in which all members of a unionized shop, such as teachers or something like that, are required to pay agency fees. And that's because the union represents their interests whether or not they join the union, because the union collectively bargains. And what the Supreme Court did was claims that this is compelled speech. It claims that this is forcing people to pay for a union that they may or may not support. And we know that's bullshit because, as a young scholar named Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez noted, in Citizens United, the court decided that corporations were allowed to compel speech from workers. And in many cases, we now see corporations threatening workers with the potential firing if they do not show up for rallies for Republican politicians. We know in many cases, workers have their bonuses and promotions tied by doing internal work that is fundamentally directed at the political system. So Anthony Kennedy has basically decided corporations are allowed to compel speech, but unions cannot take a fair share fee for the representation that they provide to workers. So what this means is there are going to be a lot of people who decide, I'm going to take the extra money on the assumption that the union is still going to bargain for me, because they will, and I'm not going to pay for that representation. And that is going to drain unions for money. We actually know because many states have actually passed similar laws to this, and the effects are immediate and they're very powerful. We've actually had studies by Hertel Fernandez and others showing that these sorts of laws decrease the amount of money that unions have pretty dramatically, and they actually end up decreasing turnout among working class folks because those folks are no longer being mobilized, they're no longer being engaged because unions simply do not have the money to keep in touch with those workers.
You know, it's in a way I sort of feel like, you know, the Supreme Court isn't this apolitical. I'm sort of starting to hit me, you know. Starting to hit me. The Democrat in me always overwhelmed me on this. My feelings in the Supreme Court.
And the thing that's really key about this decision, though, is that the Supreme Court decisions before this that allowed agency fees, the Supreme Court precedent was called Abood. It was decided in 1978. It had never been questioned by any court until you had a 5-4 Republican majority in the court. And that's really telling. What it tells you is we do not live in a country of laws. We live in a country fundamentally of politics. And I think that people didn't catch this enough with things like the Affordable Care Act. When John Roberts struck down the Medicaid expansion, he was fundamentally doing a political act. And we need to really understand it that way, and we need the media to stop pretending that the court is not institutional. We need the Democratic Party to stop doing it. And I think people worry that this is sort of demagoguery, but it's really not, because the alternative is that we have a world in which democratically elected leaders who hold the will of the people can't enact the agenda that they've been elected to enact because of a court that is inventing new doctrines out of thin air. And we know it's a new doctrine because for 40 years, the doctrine had been something entirely different. And the fact that Alito and the court are willing to sort of step out on this limb and step outside of these doctrines is clear. But the more important thing is we know also that unions have been working through test cases, to basically see if there's any way to use this decision in their favor by using the idea that compelled speech by, say, a corporation is bad. And I'm fairly confident that these cases are not going to work. But every time one of these cases falls through, we will have more evidence, right, that the Supreme Court treats corporate speech different from labor speech and is fundamentally putting their fingers on the scale. That's
really interesting, actually, how they're, you know, what's an example of how they would use one of those in their favor?
Yeah, you should check it out. There's a great piece by Rachel Cohen in The Intercept on this. I mean, you could see a lot of examples where workers are compelled to do speech that's fundamentally political in nature on behalf of their employers. And so unions are going to start challenging that. And we will see if the Supreme Court decides that speech is also compelled. The key distinction here that the court is trying to make is public sector versus private sector. So we can easily imagine examples in which, say, a public sector employee is being forced by a conservative school board to teach maybe the history of slavery in a weird way. And we will see, does the Supreme Court consider that to be compelled speech? And if they don't, we sort of know where their interests lie.
I wonder where it does lie. So
I'm saying I don't think there's going to be a lot of success with these cases.
Right. So the answer really is, you know, for you know, Janice is a great example of of why we need to pack the courts. I mean, it seems. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Pack the courts sounds radical, but what it really is saying is like the democratically elected politicians should have some ability to influence a court that has shown itself to be a fundamentally political institution. That's all it says.
So who do you think Trump's going to nominate to replace Kennedy?
So I haven't been looking at this closely, but I know that he has said he's going to pull off of the same slate of justices that he had proposed and took Gorsuch off of. So folks like Brett Kavanaugh.
Was it Mike Pence who tweeted out something like, "I want to thank Justice Kennedy for all his service throughout the years, and how they're going to replace him with someone like Scalia." Which is a great way to say thank you to someone. I really respect you. I'm going to pick someone who is more like your former dead who's on the Supreme Court with you. Not someone like you, though. We're not going to go with someone like you. Which, Kennedy sucks. Kennedy was a center-right justice, but at the same time, for a number of cases, he was the deciding vote for a number of very important cases. He was the deciding vote.
Stands out. Obergefell stands out, which was the gay rights case. Probably the most important recent case was actually Fair Housing Act stuff. He's been good on some cases regarding affirmative action in fair housing and racial discrimination. He's been the sort of swing vote on abortion, which does not in any way mean that abortion rights have not been very much dismantled under his tenure. But there was some, and he actually has many decisions that were incredibly offensive. He believes, for example, that women often regret abortions, and there's really no evidence that that's true. So he had an incredibly paternalistic view on abortion, but he was never willing to go as far as the far right. And what's concerning is that the Federalist Society, which is a right-wing organization that basically organizes and invests heavily on ensuring that the courts are right-wing, has a very close connection to Donald Trump. Donald Trump sees basically that the way that he maintains the Republican base is by allowing the Federalist Society to determine his judicial picks. And I think it would be very surprising if a Flake or a Collins was able to override the Republican caucus on getting a Federalist Society pick. And that means that you're going to get a more down-the-line conservative who really does not think that Roe v. Wade is law, does not think that Casey is law, which is the sort of case that comes after Roe versus Wade on abortion rights. I don't think that any affirmative action of any sort will be able to stand up. And I think that there's actually a decent chance of backsliding on gay rights as well.
So, like I said, what a downer. I mean,
yes, no, it's very bad.
I'm taking this stuff in.
The courts are weak.
Right. And
I think it's very important to remember that the courts are weak. And if you have an overwhelming congressional majority in a presidential and you win the presidency, you're going to have to take action to use the democratic process to rein in the courts.
One of the things that, throughout the Trump administration, I've always said to people to give them sort of an optimistic view, to feel good, that, is that most of the things that the Trump administration has done is reversible. I mean, there are people who are hurting, and there are people who, but again, nothing different than the Bush administration. People died and got hurt then, and we were able to reverse things then. People died and got hurt during the Obama administration. Unfortunately, I wish we can say that something better happened after that and we progressed on, but we sort of regressed after that. I think actually talking with you, even though it all sucks and it's all terrible, and from what I've been reading from other people, is that, even though we obviously won't be able to reverse who Trump picks, there are things we can do to make those people, those Supreme Court justices, matter less. And maybe if we get some sort of Democratic Party with some I don't know, testicular fortitude to steal a quote from Mick Foley.
I say we have to get rid of the norm cucks. And that, I think that actually leans towards a sort of important divide within the Democratic Party that is beyond the sort of economic policy divide. And it's who is committed to the idea that the norms of the Senate matter? And I have a lot of love for Patrick Leahy and a lot of issues, but at the end of the day, he did believe that the blue slip tradition, which is this really weird tradition that has no basis in any sort of law, but it was basically that if a home state senator who presided over a circuit court didn't want a judge to be up for a vote, they could nix that vote. And Leahy, during his time as the chair of the Judiciary Committee, allowed Republicans to stonewall a bunch of Obama appointees. And I would say, on one hand, he was entirely wrong to do that. On the other hand, I think that there was a lot of opportunities for folks who are on the sort of broad progressive umbrella to challenge Leahy on that, and very little actions was taken, despite the fact that Patrick Leahy was allowing Republicans to hold up women judges, judges of color, gay judges. We should have been energized and mobilized around that, and I think that that was a failing. But yeah, fundamentally, the Democratic Party has allowed the we used to play Monopoly, and we had this thing where, like, if you were the first person to break a rule or a norm or like break the trust of another person, you got like a little advantage, right?
Right.
And if you kept doing it and no one else stopped you, you would keep gaining these small advantages that would get you better off at the Monopoly game. And that's really what's happening with the Democratic and Republican Party, where like Democrats always let Republicans break the norms first. And that means that like each time the Republicans do it, they gain this tiny advantage, but each sliver of advantage sort of builds up to the point where you have won how many presidential elections with a popular vote? 1 in the last 8, and you're appointing 6 of the 9 judges that sit on the court.
Right. You know, you just made me think, this is not nothing to do with the courts, but speaking of like the norms and how, you know, the whole civility argument and everything, which is bullshit and ridiculous. You know, Maxine Waters was never really someone who I really thought anything. I mean, she was a Democrat, and if I was in her district, I'd vote for her because she's a Democrat and better than a Republican. But, you know, her politics wasn't anything that really, you know, seemed to me to be just your ordinary, everyday Democrat. And, you know, when she sort of went viral with Trump with what she was saying, I was always sort of like, yeah, I get it. She's cool. But, I mean, she focuses way too much on Russia, and she's focused just on that, and she's not really. But then the other day she comes out and says, you know, she's receiving death threats because she basically said that the Trump administration, people who work for the Trump administration, shouldn't expect to go out and eat and be comfortable. People will ridicule them. People will make them very uncomfortable when they're out in public. And even the Democrat Schumer, who sucks, and
Schumer is so bad. It's like hard. It's hard to like fathom how bad he is.
Something I started to like to do is that I tell people that in 2016 I voted third party, and then I tell them that it was my first time ever voting third party, and then I tell them that it was actually just for the Green Party candidate who was running against Schumer, and I voted for Hillary actually in the actual general election for the presidency, because I voted for Hillary. Yeah. But Schumer literally is the first time I ever voted. Like, other than obviously in New York, I could vote under the Working Families Party, and it still counts for the Democrat or whatever. But someone who was actually just running under third party in 2016, I couldn't not vote for Hillary. I felt like even in New York it was safe, but I just felt like, you know, I had to do it. But I still wanted to say fuck you to the Democratic Party, so I voted for the random Green Party candidate who had some weird, crazy nickname, actually, who was like, it was like first name, Dragonfly, last name, and I was like, what am I doing? But I was like, I gotta do it, because screw Schumer. But, like, back to my point about Maxine Waters. She's out there today after receiving death threats for saying these things, and I think it was yesterday, and she says, if you're gonna shoot, you better shoot straight. I'm like, what? This is fantastic. This is what we should be doing.
I do. The one thing I do love, I mean, like, Maxine Waters and Barbara Lee are just like fucking amazing California reps, and you know, Lee took that amazing vote at the AUMF that, God, still to this day, it just like gives a skip in my step when I think about it. Like, the amount of courage she had with that. But Waters was great on apartheid too, and she like really fucked up with like Reagan and stuff. Like, she fucked with Reagan, and yeah, like, it's so good to hear Democrats talking about that, because like, honestly, like, fuck Republicans, and like, yeah, like, make their lives miserable. They want to live in our cities. Like, the Cato Institute, we're like so off track, but like, the Cato Institute has that thing where they like say how free your state is by how much cousin fucking is allowed, and I'm like, if you guys think that like cousin fucking states are the great states, then go live there. But you don't. You live in our cities, and we're gonna roast you if you try to like hurt undocumented people and then come and eat in a Mexican restaurant. Like, you're asking for it.
Now, do you think some people feel like that? You know, there's no way this many Trump administration officials on a regular work week eat at so many Mexican restaurants. So do you think that this was something that was like they knew they were gonna get a reaction, or what's your? Because see, I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist usually, and but something is maybe the first time with what's her face from the DHS, maybe she.
Oh, Nielsen.
Yeah,
Kirsten Nielsen.
Yeah, I think she probably did it legitimately. And then it had the DC DSA chapter did what they did to her, and then maybe like the other people were like, we should fuck with them and do it too. Like I don't think though that like it was something that was planned from the beginning.
I think it's genuinely a good tactic to roast them, and like I honestly think part of it is just because like it shows you how.
I'm talking about like Stephen Miller and all these other people from the Trump administration randomly going to a Mexican restaurant that same week. Like, they all had a hinkering for tacos all of a sudden. I mean,
yeah, I think like the idea that like sort of they are somehow winning when they get shouted out at restaurants is probably not correct. Among other things, like it shows how the media has been so bad on this, man. Like Manuel Duran has been detained by ICE for 3 months now, and no one's written a fucking op-ed, a single op-ed. You can go to like look this up. Like the New York Times hasn't written a single op-ed about this guy being detained by ICE, but they'll write 17 pieces about yelling Nielsen out of a restaurant and yelling Sarah Sanders out of a restaurant, and it's just like honestly the only thing that gives me hope is like young journalists who I see covering this stuff. Like they're much smarter about this. They understand the stakes. They've actually lived through. They know people who are being affected by these administrations, and like, man, like the mainstream has been so bad on this stuff.
Speaking of the New York Times and the civility argument, discussion, whatever you want to call it, I think it's a good time to bring up the fact that you, Sean, you are, I think, apparently the New York Times thinks differently.
They do.
Are the guy who started the Abolish ICE movement. Whether you're the first person to say abolish ICE, who knows? But you're certainly the first person who decided to take that rallying cry, that call to action, and turn it into a movement. And New York Times wrote a piece about Abolish ICE, and I'm scanning through it, and I'm like, and then they say they give someone else credit for it. Fine, perhaps they, like I said, found someone who was the first to say it or whatever, but they didn't mention you at all. How do you not mention Sean McElwee in an article about Abolish ICE? I mean, I guess it's the same way you completely ignore Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez before she wins her damn race. But let's stick with Abolish ICE at first.
I feel like I'm happy to say like it's like annoying like they didn't cite me, but like what's weirder is like they cited the PCCC. I have no problems with the PCCC, but the PCCC has not been active on this issue. The progressive, it's like something about the progressive campaigns. Like United We Dream Action has been aggressive on this issue. Make the Road Action has been aggressive on this issue. Why not talk to an immigrants' rights group who supports abolishing ICE? And also, when we talk about the candidates, AOC was not quoted in that piece. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez brought the idea of abolish ICE to so many voters so powerfully. Like, I talk to candidates a lot about sort of the issues that they want to run on and include on their website. AOC didn't just have a part of her website that talked about abolish ICE. She brought it up in debates with Crowley. She brought it up in her social ads. She roasted him on it.
Right.
And like that, she won that election partially because of abolish ICE. Why are you not getting quotes from her in that piece? It was such a bad piece on a movement because it didn't really engage with the sort of centrality of the movement, which was a reckoning within the Democratic Party in the complicity the Democratic Party has in white supremacist immigration policies. And that's exactly fair to say. Crowley represents a district that is 50% immigrant, that is 70% people of color. He voted for ICE. He calls it a fascist agency, and he won't call for abolishing it.
That is what I found to be so funny. Like, how do you say, how do you even, how does that happen in your head? Like, how do you go, that group is a fascist group. Should we do away with it? I don't know. I mean, So you're basically saying we should keep the fascist group. I mean, what is going through your head? What is your logic behind that? And he's not the only person to say it either. There's been numerous. Cuomo, I think, Andrew Cuomo didn't go as far as calling it a fascist group, but he said they've clearly overstepped what they're supposed to do or something like that. And then he was asked, and he said, I wouldn't go that far. So you're saying let's keep the group who is overstepping and doing the bad things. Let's keep them. I mean, what is... It's actually
a great summary of what the Democratic Party seems to want, which is well-regulated fascism, right? Like, this has been the argument throughout all of Trump's tenure, which was that we sort of call out what he's doing very explicitly and we say what he's doing, but we don't escalate the tactics we use to respond to him to meet that threat. And it's just been deeply frustrating. And I think that, like, that was what made Ocasio-Cortez's campaign so powerful, was that she was willing to escalate the tactics to meet the threat that was posed very directly to her community by ICE. Right. And we're seeing more and more people start to hop on the Abolish ICE train, to the point where, like, I'm not even worried about will candidates support this. I'm worried about being co-opted at this point, right. Which is obviously a great thing to be worried about. But is so important, and I'm, like, happy to talk to you about co-option, and let me hear where you're at with that.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I don't think anyone's even got into that point really to even bringing that up. So I think this is a great talk to have, actually, because people are still trying to just grapple with Abolish ICE as even like a thing. Like they're not even at the point, I think, where they're thinking like, all right, once we get this to be something that's not. Democrats don't think it's career ending to even put forward. What goes from there? So what do you think of that? What would happen if this got co-opted? Where do you lie on that in terms of like where this could go? Oh, Sean, you froze on me, buddy? Uh-oh. Let's call you back. Let's see what's 1 second, everybody. I'm going to call Sean right back. The Skype call is going through. Give us 1 second here. Oh, that's weird. Uh-oh, he looks like he dropped. All right, no problem. He'll come right back on. So let's talk to. Let me give you some updates actually about what's been going on with the show while we wait for Sean to get back on. Let me just let him know. Let me call you back. Let me give him another ring here. Oh, there we go. There we go. You all right there? Oh, we dropped. There we go. All good?
All right. Yeah. We're good to go.
Cool. So no, it's all good. People, you're out and about doing things. Yeah. So what are your worries about a possibility of them co-opting the Democrats, centrist Democrats, co-opting Abolish ICE?
Yeah, so it's worth sort of briefly discussing where Abolish ICE comes out of, which is the sort of anti-deportation movement. Since ICE was created, it's been a contested agency, right? 10 Democrats in the Senate and actually close to a majority of House members voted against establishing ICE. So it's never been, like, which again, like, makes it like sort of wild that it's now considered radical to say abolish ICE when it wasn't at the time considered very radical to vote against the establishment of ICE. But as soon as you have ICE, you have these anti-deportation movements arising. It's worth remembering that Obama was called to the border in chief by actually immigrant activists.
Right.
And So I think that if you have a Abolish ICE legislation that doesn't fundamentally end mass deportation and end deportation, you have like sort of lost the thread, which is it's not about the name. It's about the fact that ICE is doing ethnic cleansing through deportation.
So what would, one of the things that bothers me the most, actually, because I want to make sure we have enough time to to talk about everything else I want to talk about. One of the things that bothers me the most is people here abolish ICE, and Republicans mainly go, oh, you want open borders, sex trafficking, right. Child slavery. Oh, what do you, Sean McElwee, person who has founded the Abolish ICE movement, say to that? Because I have a feeling, I have a way to, but I want to hear what your I guess, rebuttal to that is.
Sure. So interior enforcement, which is what ICE does, actually doesn't affect immigration flows. There's a lot of evidence on this. What affects immigration flows is war and violence in the origin country, climate change, sort of economic factors, policy factors. All of those affect sort of how many people are coming across the border. At the end of the day, though, how many people are being deported has no effect on that, because no one who's leaving their country is in like a flotilla knows like, oh, ICE is cracking down more aggressively, I guess we'll go somewhere else. Like, right. That doesn't happen.
Right.
And I think, Abolish ICE gives us such a powerful way to talk about the way that U.S. policy, from the period war to capitalist demands for cheap, exploitable labor, have created the situation we have now, which is we brought a bunch of people in this country. We made it so that they could never get a passive citizenship because we wanted them to be outside of labor law, or capital wanted them to be outside of labor law so that they were easy to exploit. And now they face the threat of deportation. And we've actually seen instances where employers, when an undocumented person is filed for an unemployment claim or a workplace discrimination claim or a claim for compensation for an injury, they've called up ICE and said, deport this person so we don't have to pay this claim. And I think that's a great example of how the sort of like capitalist sort of plutocratic structure is relying on white supremacy to achieve its ultimate aim.
Right. So let's, trying to see how much time we have here. All right, let's talk about, like you said, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was the first, really, at least on that level, candidate to back Abolish ICE. Not even just like made it her rallying cry as well. And I still can't believe the New York Times didn't mention you or even talk to her. How ridiculous! But anyway, so on Tuesday, she beat. They called him, I guess, the King of Queens. He's the head of the Queens Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. Kevin James, he is not. But Crowley, actually, they both. Yeah, maybe actually no. But Crowley, I have to say, as someone who's lived in Queens my whole life, as someone who's political, I knew who he was. Right. But he never was really someone who was like, oh, when I think of Queens, I think of Crowley. Like, he never showed his face. Mm-hmm. So when she wins on Tuesday, and I was following this race. Now, you, on the other hand, I was following it for a little bit, but for a couple of months. And then, as we got closer, I would say a couple of months ago, I was like, she's going to do it. But you, I think you pointed out a tweet where it was like, what, last summer? Where you were like, she's going to do it.
Yeah. So I host a happy hour in the East Village, and she came by actually last year, and she came by after like a day of knocking on doors. And I was like, look at my watch. I'm like, knocking on doors? Like, you're early. But she had her like elevator pitch down. She's like, this guy's never been elected. He's taking PAC money. He's not concerned about the district. Like, I think I can beat him. And I was like, all right. And I think like as it started to like progress, like you saw more and more just like talents go into that campaign. The win number was always going to be like reasonably low. And I remember so many conversations at the 2016 election where, me and other socialists and progressives, and we would say, we need somebody who has Obama's us and Bernie Sanders is them. And I think that AOC so perfectly represents exactly that, where she's like, this is who we are. We are a multiracial, populist, working class movement. And this is who they are. And they are the people with the money and the power. And we're going to fucking take them down. And honestly, like, just watching after her win, the way that people have engaged with her ideas, I think she's going to be such a powerful, face for democratic socialist ideas, and is really going to make those ideas like be contested, right? We had in Seattle, where as soon as you have a socialist city council member, the media has to report on everything she says. They have to take her policy ideas seriously, and that has an incredible amount of weight. At the end of the day, she can propose amendments, she can propose riders, and she can make Democrats take definitive stances on the issues that she ran on. And so I think that, like, the power of her movement is going to be incredible and is going to be felt for years to come.
You know what I find really important, actually, with her running, obviously, and her winning, obviously, and how she's been tackling the criticisms or the write-ups about this is how she did it or this is what she stands for from people who are, establishment pundits.
Who never paid attention.
Right, centrist Democrats. She is the perfect example of how the left, the real left, democratic socialists, people with the politics of Bernie Sanders, she is showing that the people who supported Bernie Sanders, the young people, the millennials, the people on that spectrum ideology-wise, they really are the true, the true left. Like, they really are the real deal. Like, because she shows the intersectionality of it, because that's what she like. The perfect she circles it all. Like, she shows that it's identity, it's the politics, it's the work. Because so many of these pundits are coming out saying, oh, she only won because of the demographics, because that's all they want to make it about. And she comes out and she puts her foot down and says, no, that's not why. And you don't see people on the left going like, no, she only won because of her support of Medicare for all and her support for economic issues. You don't see that at all, because the people on the left, and I've been trying to beat this over people's heads. We are, when you see these Democrats and these centrists trying to use identity politics against the left, which I always find to be ridiculous. It's like she is showing that that's not the case. It's never been that way. The left has always been the people who care about race and economics and all of this stuff on the same level. There's not one thing that's more important than the other. There's not one thing we focus on. It's all or nothing.
Yeah. I mean, the answer is she won because she had, 3 years in that district doing organizing work, in a year knocking on doors. And I like Patel and Bunkadeko a lot. I know them both. I thought they ran good campaigns. But and Bunkadeko got within 3 points of Clark, and Patel hit 40, which I think no one expected. But the thing that put AOC over the edge was that she just had more time with that district. And she had deeper ties to that district. And she had a really strong critique of a candidate who was not prepared to be critiqued. I mean, everyone says that Crowley took this seriously. He didn't show up to a debate, right? Like, everyone's like, oh, Crowley was like, really going at. I don't know, like, he spent most of his time. He was known. He had nicknames of Virginia Joe and stuff because he spent so little time in the district.
Right.
And when they had a debate, he sent a surrogate in his place rather than actually debate her face to face. And I think that, like, when you have such a slap in the face to the district, you're hurting for it. But yeah, I mean, like, at the end of the day, she put in a lot of work and a lot of time to make that win happen, and only the sort of top line gets seen.
Well, even if you want to compare it to the other, for people who are listening and aren't familiar, what were the other two candidates' names? I was following them.
Yeah. Sorry. New York's ninth, Adam Bunkadeko, was against Yvette Clarke, and he was within 3 points. I think it was 48-51. And then Suraj Patel challenged Carolyn Maloney. That was in the 12th district, and he got about 41% of the vote.
Now, I was following their races. I was following their campaigns, and I obviously they were thrown in there with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez because they were three young progressives, and they are three young progressives. If you look at the entire the entirety of their platform, they each were certainly to the left of who they were running against, and I certainly would have preferred either of them winning. But at the same time, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez ran a campaign that really could just be described as real. Like, I was like, she is the real deal. When you saw her speak, you knew these weren't just things that they were, maybe on board with because they had to be on board with. Like the other two, they certainly, like I said, left and progressive, but each of them had certain, and it's silly to go into it now, but they each had certain, certain issues where, it's like, I don't know. I don't really think his position on charter schools is really where it should be. Mm-hmm. That's weird for.
No, that's totally correct. Yeah.
But she, on the other hand, was the total package. No weird little are they going to be with us on that issue if they got elected? She's no question about it.
Yeah, she was always very good off the cuff, and I think some people thought that was just like some sort of like talent or something. But I always understood it as like she's been a really long time thinking about these issues. And the reason that she was able to be so good off the cuff is that she spent so much time in these communities, like understanding the issues. And I mean, honestly, her website, the issues page, is a sight to behold because you have so many candidates who consultants tell them don't take definitive positions. And Ocasio, she was just like, here's my stance, and here's the very specific piece of legislation that I'm ready to either introduce or co-sponsor. There was absolutely no point in which you did not think that she was saying something she didn't truly believe and was ready to fight on. And honestly, like, I hope that people take some lesson from that like having a position that you are ready to stand for really means a lot to voters, and they can see through pretty transparently, people who are wishy-washy on their issues.
So she, for people who aren't following, who are following this and may not know the New York district that she won, and I thought it was hilarious because that guy who runs that terrible fake news Democratic website, the Palmer Report, he's got 200,000 followers. That site definitely makes him a decent chunk of change through Google ads or whatever for just writing exactly what you're still with her, hashtag still with her, people still want to read in here. He comes out when she won and he's talking about how she's going to lose against the Republican, I bet, and you got to watch out for that. And it's like, dude, do you know the district?
Republican on the ballot.
There is this guy who runs every time. His name's Anthony Pappas or something like that. He runs every.
He won't get more than 5%. There's no question.
This is a district that basically. You win the primary, you win the general. Yeah. Like the primary is actually the real fight. There is no general fight.
Right.
And a lot of people really, even on a broader sense, didn't understand how that was, at least in my view, for when Bernie was running in 2016. His fight was always going to be with Hillary. Hillary was always going to be the one who he was going to have trouble defeating. He was someone who I felt was specifically, maybe any other Republican candidate he would have had trouble with, maybe because they would have used all that boogeyman socialism bullshit. But he was, because of his worker bona fides, he was the guy to go up against Trump. But that stuff aside, whatever, a lot of ways this mirrors all that. It's stunning to really watch, actually.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are districts in this country that Republicans win, fewer than 20%, fewer than 10%. There are districts where Republicans win fewer than 5% of the vote. There is absolutely no reason for those Democrats who represent those districts to not be. I mean, Carolyn Maloney voted against the Iran deal. There was no reason for Joe Crowley to not only be in favor of Medicare for all, but climate justice. He should support fucking reparations in a D34 district. these guys should be in favor of the Weatherman Undergrounds because, like, they have no electoral threat except the one that exists from the left. And I'm sort of joking, but also maybe kind of. Like, why not have someone representing one of these districts who is actually ready to use this as a bully pulpit, who's ready to sort of, like, introduce really, really left legislation to make the media talk about it? Because on the right, you have immigration bills that are straight up fascism, and then immigration bills that are, like, kind of fascism, and everyone in the media calls it, the compromise bill. So what if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was like, you know what, Medicare for all, that's baby stuff. Full-on socialized medicine, nationalized healthcare. Then all of a sudden, Medicare for all is the centrist, reasonable compromise solution.
Right.
And you've never had candidates willing to do this in these districts because they fundamentally are still constrained not by the ideology of the district, but by the ideology of their aides, of their consultants, and of themselves. And I think, like, why not have the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? Why not have Cori Bush in Missouri's First calling for prison abolition? There's no chance Republicans are ever going to win this district. So why not at least have someone who's willing to stand up for the most left values that we can have in this country?
Well, that's really the problem. To really start to end where we started, that these people who run these strategist companies and firms, who tell the Democrats what will help them win, what will make them win, they're telling them exactly the opposite of what we're talking about right here.
Mm-hmm.
But
their time is over. Look, AOC cut her own fucking videos with volunteers, and she beat the best. Like, there is absolutely no reason that a candidate can't win a race with $200,000 with a big old volunteer army and folks coming on board to cut videos and stuff. We are all fucking millennials. We know how to make a compelling cut a video. I know that, like, we briefly cut out because of internet stuff, but that's not us. That's the capitalists.
We know how to deal with that stuff and get right back on the feed.
I've got a Wi-Fi hotspot right now. So exactly, like, we can make these campaigns win. In a competitive primary, 10% of people, 13% of people in this district voted. The win number is easily winnable with enough door knocks, and we can actually beat these consultant classes and show them how it's done.
Exactly. I think that's the perfect way. We just like AOC, like I was saying before, we circled it up here. We went around and we hit exactly everything we needed to hit. We ended on the good note. Unfortunately, I teased it on Twitter, and somehow we didn't get to it. LeBron James going to the Lakers was the big news. We really needed to discuss it, but
I know so little about sports. I'm so sorry, but I know. My mother explained Fortnite to me yesterday.
Oh, this is terrible for our whole argument that millennials are gonna figure this all out. And I'm actually not a sports person either, but I know what Fortnite is. Come on, man. Jeez. All right.
She said it was like the Hunger Games, but turned into a video game. So
that's a good way to describe it, definitely. And okay,
right, cool.
Let's actually end on some breaking news that you probably will know maybe a little bit more than video games and sports about. The leftist in Mexico just won the presidency.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
AMLO?
Yeah.
Oh shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, he won. So this seems to be. I'm just seeing this now. Maybe it happened right before we went on, but I'm just seeing it now. But I did get the LeBron James breaking news before we went on. That's the important thing.
Wait, where'd he go?
Oh, he's going to the Lakers. Yeah, he's going to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's leaving. He's leaving his beloved hometown, and he's something like $154 million deal over 4 years.
Oof.
Yeah.
Still, nothing compared to what a hedge funder makes.
Absolutely.
Sports
Absolutely.
People, I'm fine with making as much money as they want.
Listen,
take it from the hedge fund people.
Listen, all throughout like high school and everything, I was always like jocks and everything. But then, as you get older and you get more into politics and you read about this stuff, like, they're really the only professional sports stars. Really, are the only workers who make bank. Like, you gotta support those guys because hopefully they'll continue to make bank and bring all the other workers up with them once we get a full-on socialist utopia. All right. Excuse me. Now I'm like choking. All right. Sean McElwee, co-founder of Data for Progress. Follow Sean.
By the way, I should say abolishice.org. You can buy an Abolish ICE t-shirt. The money goes to Make the Road Action, United We Dream Action, and other frontline groups. I need to pitch that.
Oh man, you got to get better with that, dude. When I asked you before the show, how do you want me to introduce you? That's where you throw in literally every single thing you want me to plug.
I wear 7 hats. I wear so many hats.
It's all good, man. I really appreciate you joining us from wherever you are. I know you were traveling and we had to move the show around a little bit. No problem at all. We gave the people something to watch on a Sunday night now that Westworld is over for the season. This will be listened to as a podcast, I'm sure, by many, many people, judging by the other episodes. Thanks again for joining us, man, and I hope to have you on again real soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man. Have a great one.
Take care. You too. Boop, boop, boop. There goes the Skype call. Ooh, I love that sound. Boop, boop. And let me put me on here as the main source here. There we go. There we go. All right, people. It is Sunday night. We have a few minutes left. Let me give you updates. And then the next episode, I promise, we will do calls. I'll have a specific Skype line dedicated to taking your calls, and we'll do it that way. But let's talk about some news here. First up, let me know actually how the stream went, because I am using a new computer that I had to purchase because there have been some changes in my life that I'm about to get to that required me to get a new computer. And I literally it's been a process setting it up, because if you use one MacBook for your whole entire what was it, like 3 years with all your stuff and your everyday stuff, it takes a while to really get all the stuff you need on the new one without still filling it up with the trash from the old one, so the new one isn't bogged down and slowed down right off the bat. But you still need to take some of the stuff, because then you can't run the feed. I don't have all the assets and the photos and the pictures and the sound effects and the intros and the blah, 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 blah. You know the drill. Actually, maybe he does, because maybe not everyone here runs a podcast. It's okay. So that on that front, let me know how the stream looks. Let me know if there was any sort of, other than that one issue that I fixed, it was a user issue, my fault, where I went out for a small portion at the beginning of the show. Let me know if there was any dropouts, any, lagging on the live stream on YouTube. Let me know that stuff. Second of all, I had promised you guys who are patrons, patreon.com/MattBinder, that would update you on some news. And I said I had a new gig in the works, and you might have seen me. I started there this past week. I'm now doing tech reporting for Mashable.com. I'm very excited to do that. Because it honestly will give me the ability to spend more time actually on this show, booking guests and everything, because the juggling I was doing before that, after the stuff going on with Cafe.com changing and switching things up, and me not working at Cafe.com, and then working with one of the other websites under the company that runs Cafe.com, and I was doing some stuff for their parenting website, The Dad, for a little while, and I was doing some freelance stuff. All that, yeah. So I will have more time now to dedicate to this show. Also, I will be able to make up for that last episode on last week that was postponed. I will be having that information for all you shortly. And we will be having some good stuff coming up. I've had some good guests working things out. I don't want to name drop until things are confirmed, and that will be going first to the patrons, and then I'll announce on Twitter. Like I've been doing, nothing changes there. We are creeping up on the halfway point to the goal, which means I will start throwing out half of the members, patron-only stuff. As soon as we hit that, I'll be probably giving, the idea was once we hit the goal on Patreon, I would do a patron-only members show where, a short weekly broadcast where I quickly run down the news, stuff that I wouldn't get to necessarily maybe if it wasn't long enough to have a full-on guest, or if that week, I have a guest that wasn't talking about that issue, and by the time the next show came, there was something else that happens, because the news cycle moves so fast now. So yeah, I'll be doing that. So once we hit that halfway point, nothing says I can't start doing every other week, giving you guys some sort of bonus, patron-only material. Let's go to the YouTube live stream comment section here. Theo says more like matchable, and Kennedy replied to Theo with a da-dum tss. Yeah, okay. Theo also had a reply to when we were talking with Sean about the issues with the Skype call dropping out. And Theo said, "Thank you, capitalism, for teaching us resilience." That's true. I would say capitalism has made us stronger. So when we fully are a socialist nation, the people who lived under capitalism will be able to say, I lived this, and I'm a little bit more, I know how to deal with this stuff when maybe some terrible far-right candidate tries to bring it back. My dad was watching the show, and when I was getting Sean back on the feed and doing some clicking to pass the time for you all, he would like to name drop the movie Hereditary, which was fantastic. It's a good movie, actually. You should all see it. Let's see what else in the comments section today. Theo also had some funny sound effects to give me as well, with some LMAOs and some adios mios and all that fun stuff. Folks, it is Sunday night. I'm sure there is some sort of Last Week Tonight you could all watch. I hope trying different days out is something I'm going to continue to do, actually. We've been doing it pretty frequently. I think the last 3, 4, or 5 shows were all a Saturday afternoon. I want to test out some other days, different times, and see how that works with you all. Again, most people are still listening to this show as a podcast. Many from the analytics of the podcast host I use. In fact, many thousands of people, more than that, tens of thousands of people who listen to this show are on the podcast, whereas literally a handful of you I can count on sometimes 2 to 4 hands are on the live stream. But the point of the live stream is that Patreons seem to really enjoy the live stream because they seem to be the ones who are watching on the live stream. And also the comments, which are great. Usually, somehow tonight they are not. Not to knock Theo and my dad. And Kennedy, who would like to drop in and say, I want to see Hereditary so bad. It's a really good movie, actually. It was one of those horror movies where, there's not jump scares and things like that. You're not going to be screaming throughout, jumping out of your seat, or, the cheap thriller type stuff. But it will give you a headache because it is so tense. I can't remember the last time I saw a movie where I really wasn't sure where it was going. I went into the movie thinking not much in terms of knowing where it was going. I was really I sat down and I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. I have no idea really what I'm here for. And then it got to a point, 20, 30 minutes in, I would say, where you're like, okay, I sort of see where this is going. And then without doing an M. Night Shyamalan swerve, a legit, holy shit moment, they change it up. And it's I have no idea where this is going again. And in fact, I have less of an idea of where this is going than when I came in and sat down. And I had no idea then either. And the movie is really good. If it doesn't win some sort of, Kennedy says it looks more in the vein of The Witch. It definitely is like that, but I would say better. The Witch was a good movie, but this is something that was much better than The Witch. Although there isn't anyone in this movie who's as likable as the goat from The Witch. It was Black Phillip, right? I liked that goat. He was a good character. So everybody, I will see you the next episode. I will let you all know who is coming onto the show. This conversation with Sean was fantastic. We got to talk about Supreme Court, which I really want to talk about. We got to talk about Abolish ICE, which I really want to talk about. And I'm sure we will have Sean on for both of those things again. And we'll have other guests talking about both of those things on this show again, because they are constantly going to be in the news. Because that's the way, the Supreme Court, obviously, when Trump picks his replacement for Kennedy. And then I really do think the Abolish ICE movement is going to really continue to pick up steam. And I think it's going to be, as they say, an idea whose time has come. And it's going to happen. I don't know when. But it's going to happen. Like Medicare for all, it's going to happen. And it's going to happen sooner than people think. And, of course, we'll also be talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez a lot more, because she's on her way to Washington, folks. We're going to have a proud 28-year-old millennial democratic socialist in Washington, representing the district right over from me. And I think she's going to be a real force. And I think, again, she can't do it alone. But, with all these movements gaining steam, then leading to the real, I think the real change maker in terms of these ideas becoming mainstreamed with Bernie Sanders' 2016 run. And then all these candidates and all these ideas that campaign sparked and inspired, and then we're here now with Alexandria. I think, and then of course Cynthia Nixon. Hopefully, if you weren't on board before, she can do it, and I want to let you know that she can do it, because I can tell you she can do it. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be, dare I say, a lot harder than any of the other races where we had a chance. Even the ones where we've won, like with defeating Crowley with AOC. Cuomo is someone who is deeply, like Hillary Clinton style, entrenched with the establishment Democratic Party and the lobbyists and the campaign funders. But if there's anyone who can do it, it's Cynthia Nixon, and she can do it. So that's our show for today, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on the stream. Patreon.com/MattBinder. Become a patron today. We're getting so close to throwing out some member stuff. Support this show by subscribing on iTunes. Leave a review. Please leave a review. We're getting close to 100 reviews in the short amount of time, less than a year. This has been a podcast. And tell all your friends about the show. It is hot in here. I shut the AC off because I didn't want any noise to get in here. It is hot. I'm going to go turn the AC on, everyone. See you all next time. Oh, man, I'm sweaty. On Doomed.